Chapter 1. You don't look like a lawyer. That's a new one. Kyle Carnan regarded the woman in front of his desk. At 35, he was just beginning to appreciate older women, and the one sitting on his client chair was worth appreciating. Carol Baker appeared to be in her mid-40s, late 40s he decided, but still looking vital. Light makeup and yellow blonde hair. It had to be a dye job, but a very well-done dye job. Her blouse was open enough that he forced himself to look at her blue eyes. His father had once told him that the women of Houston, because of the humidity, looked young longer than women any other place on earth. Women of that age appreciated him also. His movie star looks and confident manner had pulled several of them in as clients. "People tell me I look exactly like a lawyer," Kyle said with an amused look. "Yes, I guess you do. A movie lawyer though, not a real lawyer. I've seen enough real lawyers in the last 3 days to last a lifetime. Most of them are either frumpy women or men in expensive suits that don't fit right. None of them looked like you. With that hair and those suspenders, you look like an actor playing a lawyer." "That's very astute, Mrs. Baker," Kyle said. "I am an actor who plays lawyers, theater, film, and television, but I'm also a licensed attorney who's been practicing almost 10 years. Anything I would have seen you in? I played the prosecutor in Death of a Used Car Salesman." At her perplexed look, he added, "It's an independent film." "Anything I would have seen you in," she repeated. "I was in the pilot episode of CSI Houston." "I saw that. I'm surprised I don't remember you." "I was a locally cast feature extra. I wasn't cast as a lawyer per se, but I looked like a lawyer coming out of the courthouse as the main character walked in." He hastened to add, "I played Clarence Darrow in Inherit the Wind and Atticus Finch in To Kill a Mockingbird." "Alley theater? I wish," Kyle said smiling. "Darrow was in my high school and Finch was in college. Drama major." "So, you are a lawyer but you want to play one on TV? That beats waiting tables, I guess." "My partner Audrey Wilkes' idea." "So," he said, clicking open a pen and pulling a clean yellow legal pad in front of him with a flourish. "Why are you seeing so many lawyers in so few days? What's your pressing legal issue?" "I killed my husband." 17 years earlier. Sitting in the third row of the Lamar Auditorium, high school junior Audrey Wilkes felt a thrill as the curtains opened on a courtroom scene. Act 2 of Inherit the Wind, and Kyle Carnan, a senior and her crush since freshman year, was fantastic in the part of flamboyant lawyer Clarence Darrow. On stage, she had hardly recognized him. Kyle's hair, one of his best features in Audrey's opinion, was cut in a way that was intended to look poorly barbered and not well taken care of. He had shaved part of it to mimic male pattern baldness. His suit pants were ill-fitting and held up loosely by suspenders. His face had no makeup, but he had sunburned it to appeal to complete the illusion of middle age. Kyle didn't look like the handsome, athletic, and popular senior who Audrey had come to see, but he did look as much like Clarence Darrow as any 17-year-old could hope to. None of the other young actors' efforts at getting in character had come close to his. Audrey whispered to her friend Leilani, "Now there's an actor who knows how to commit." Leilani Billmore was also a junior, whose African-American father had married her Hawaiian mother to produce a daughter who people often mistook for Caribbean. "Good news for you if your plan works," Leilani whispered back. Asked Audrey in an irritated tone. "Whatever plan you're cooking up to get with him, that's what plan." On stage, Kyle as Darrow was speaking. His voice carried across the auditorium while maintaining the illusion that he was talking only to the witness in the courtroom on stage. "Are we to forego all this progress because we are frightened by a fable?" Slamming a prop Bible on the judge's bench, Kyle/Clarence turned to the stage jury. "Gentlemen, progress has never been a bargain. It must be paid for by—" Completely ignoring her friend's amused glances, Audrey watched enthralled as Kyle/Clarence spun his argument for the judge, jury, and auditorium audience. "That's why I want to be a lawyer," she said to Leilani. "He's cute, all right," Leilani admitted. Years of theatrical training kept Kyle Carnan from showing surprise at so blunt an admission. He nodded at Mrs. Baker encouragingly and said, "Yes, go on. It's a long story if you're willing to listen." Kyle looked at the expensive clothes and the ring with large diamond, and mentally calculated the fees that a murder case with a wealthy defendant might generate. "Mrs. Baker, I have as much time as you need. Coffee?" At her nod, he buzzed for Leilani, the firm's legal secretary, and asked for 2 cups of coffee, adding, "If Audrey's free, send her in to meet a new client." He looked at his new client and said, "My partner's the brains of the outfit." She gave him a look that said, "One would hope so," and began her tale. My husband was Carl Baker. Baker the baker? Head of Baker Food Group International? Carol nodded. Kyle went on. His passing was in the news 2 nights ago. Shot in his bed, apparently in his sleep. His wife is missing, feared kidnapped. I wasn't kidnapped. I got out of there and started looking for lawyers the next day. Kyle sat back. Wasn't he older? Tell me about him. The news reports are sensationalizing about how rich he was and about his missing widow and heiress. Carl started baking when he was 12. He said a guy named Baker should know how to bake. He must have had an ancestor with talent that he passed on, because his stuff was good, and not just for a kid. He baked a lot of it, and when his mom complained about the cost of the supplies, he started selling his goods, first to his friends, and then door to door, just to buy more flour and sugar. Within 6 months, he had salesmen working for him, first kids, then grown men. He opened his first shop as soon as he was old enough to sign a lease. When I met Carl, he was 61 years old and morbidly obese, from 5 decades of eating his own cookies and cakes. He was a multimillionaire then. I was a receptionist. I thought if I married him, he'd be dead in 5 years at the most, and then I'd be a multimillionaire. How old were you when you met? Wondering whether she could have been of legal age. 26. Remembering that Carl Baker had been reported as 94 when he died, Kyle did the math quickly. So, you are now 59? Yes, she said. Almost 60. Don't bother with the compliments, Mr. Carnan. I had to stay looking young. I was my husband's slave for over 30 years, and if I had gotten old, he would have sold me down the river. His slave? That's what I would call it. I thought he'd be dead in a few years, before I was 30. But after he married me, he started eating better, listening to doctors, and losing weight. He started an exercise program of sorts. What do you mean of sorts? Kyle asked. I was his exercise program. I thought it was a great idea. I'd screw him constantly, and with his health problems, his heart would give out. I made sure he was never directly on top of me in case it happened during sex. But it never did. He got stronger. He started walking, working with weights, and then jogging. The frequency increased to at least once a day, twice on weekend days. He made challenges for himself to see how long he could go without missing a day. Just when I thought he was so old he would have to slow down, his doctor gave him those damned blue pills, and the nightmare continued. I finally realized he might outlive me, and I'd die his slave. Even at 94, he was doing it once a day? Kyle asked. No. Somewhere in his early 80s he gradually slowed down. He tried on his 90th birthday, but 3 pills didn't work, and he was afraid more would kill him. Carol paused and looked into the distance. I should have slipped a dozen in his tea. Him accidentally overdosing on the blue pill when he had me for a wife would have checked out with the police, if the hospital even called them. I should have thought of that. I'd be home free, already. Carol stopped talking and sat back with a brooding look. Kyle tried to get her back on track. So tell me more about his death. Poisoned and shot. The lawyers I talked to said that any half-assed prosecutor could make it look like I poisoned him and then shot him in frustration when the poison didn't work. What did happen? I poisoned him and then shot him when the poison didn't work. Kyle held up his hands to stop her. Look, you're aware of attorney-client privilege, or you wouldn't be telling me all this. But you make it harder for me to defend you if you confess to everything up front. Don't tell my partner Audrey that you're guilty. We'll need her to develop an alternate theory in which you're not guilty, and knowing you're guilty might slow her down. But I'm not guilty, don't you get it? I killed him, yes. But as I said, I was a slave. I'm no more guilty than abolitionists like that guy who rode around shooting slave owners to free the slaves. John Brown? John Brown was hanged, so he's not the best example of a legal defense. Besides, if you go into court comparing yourself to abolitionists, black jury members will want to hang you. How do you know so much about John Brown? I suppose you played John Brown in your elementary school play? Kyle laughed, and when Mrs. Baker laughed with him, the lines on her face showed her age a little more. Before we go any further, if you want to keep talking and maintain lawyer-client privilege, you'll need to sign a contract and provide a retainer. Carol knew that wasn't strictly true, but she had made up her mind. The contract is no problem, but the retainer might be. Why? Your late husband had plenty of bread. No pun intended. The retainer for me to get started with a pre-arrest investigation would only be... Kyle picked a figure intended to surprise the new client, but not quite scare her away. 60,000. I'm sure that's reasonable, but I don't have 60,000. My husband always tightly controlled the money. Not him so much as his company's main lawyer. What do you call them? General counsel? Yeah, that guy. Carl was a nice guy, but his general counsel convinced him to let him control the money. He rarely gave me cash, just credit cards with his name on them that his accountants monitored and gave him reports on. Remember $2 bills and Susan B's? I never held either, so rarely did I get my hands on currency. McCready, the general counsel, cut the cards off as soon as he heard about the murder. Over the years, I managed to squirrel away this. She handed Kyle an envelope full of cash. He rifled through it and saw that she had separated the bills by denomination. Just over $7,000. The firm charged $10,000 for a simple DUI case. I also have this, she said, taking off her engagement and wedding rings. Kyle took them and saw that the wedding ring was a plain gold band, but the other was expensive looking, with a large diamond. I had it appraised once, and they offered $40,000 for it. Mrs. Baker watched his face for a sign of acceptance or rejection of the offer. The other lawyers I talked to shut down as soon as I said I had little money. Please don't leave me at the mercy of the public defender's office. Knowing that his partner would take a dim view of accepting a ring as a retainer, he handed it back. At that moment, Audrey Wilkes walked into the office. Leilani said you. Audrey looked at the scene in the office, Kyle handing an engagement ring to a woman she had never seen before. Am I interrupting something? She asked with a raised eyebrow. The morning after she saw Kyle on stage, Audrey sat preparing for high school debate club practice. At her table were several open books and pages of notes on the debate topic. She would be nervous at the podium, even a practice podium, with teammates as the practice audience. She avoided thinking about it by reading until her moment to stand, and then reading while her practice opponent made his arguments. When her turn came, Audrey began to speak using her notes as talking points, rather than a script. The United States had an obligation to defend itself. And while sending troops all the way to Afghanistan and Iraq may seem a strange way to defend our own soil, the facts are that Audrey began sweating profusely. She could feel it on her forehead and her armpits. It began to drip down her back only to be stopped by her bra. She felt it there, and it occurred to her that the sweat might gather on her bra strap until it overflowed. Then she couldn't get that image out of her head. As she stammered on, a drop of sweat fell on her glasses. She tried to shake the drop off with a flick of her head, but her slickened nosepiece did not hold, and her glasses slid to the right, soaking one lens in the sweat on her temple. She took the glasses off and squinted at her notes as her debate teammates began to squirm uncomfortably. After what felt like an eternity, she finished her talking points and left not only the stage, but the room. As she rushed out and into the hallway, she nearly bumped into Kyle at his locker close to the door. He was an even more jarring sight than he had been on stage, as now he looked like a middle-aged man in jeans and a high school jacket. He looked at her and laughed. Where you been, a sauna? She opened her mouth but no words came out. Her stomach clenched even more than it had on stage. He noticed the debate club sign on the door. You look like you were losing that debate, he said with a grin. At her annoyed look he said, Hey, it's just flop sweat. Happens to the best of us. I keep hand towels all over the stage just in case. He pulled one out of his locker and handed it to her.